And we're recording. Welcome to another episode of the Good Listening To podcast with me, Chris Grimes. And I'm absolutely delighted to have in my clearing the wonderful Mr. Reg Starkey, who is, he's not a madman, he's an ad man, but he came about as a very experienced ad man back in the day, round about the era as defined by that wonderful Mad Men series that did so well. So he's an ad man at heart and core. He's also a truly wonderful human being, really empathic, sensitive, gorgeous. I'm very fond of this man, so I'm very excited to talk to you. So, Mr. Reg Starkey, good morning.
Thank you, Chris. You've embarrassed me already.
And you said, just before we started recording, you said, over to you, Mr. DeMille. Is that a compliment to my new glasses, maybe?
Well, it wasn't. It was just a reference to that old joke about the three cameramen, you know, the DeMille joke. Ready when you are, Mr. DeMille. If you don't know it, I'll tell it to you another time because it's sort of.
Oh, is it too unsavoury for what we're about?
No, it's not unsavoury. It's not unsavoury. It's just Cecil B. DeMille is doing this amazing scene with a cast of thousands, and he's got three cameras on it, right? And he shouts action, and everything happens, and then he calls the first cameraman. He said, "Do you get it?" And he said, "I'm really sorry, Mr. DeMille. There was a hair in the camera, you know, and then we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it." And then he sends the next one, says, "What happened?" And the next one says, "I'm really sorry. We had a problem. You know, we couldn't get it." And then he talks to the third one, and he says, "Ready when you are, Mr. DeMille." Sorry.
No, please don't apologise. Do you know what? We couldn't resist going for the joke because you did hookers with. It reminds me of that joke, and of course, everyone would have spent the entire, next 45 minutes just thinking, "What was that flipping joke?" So I'm really glad we managed to pin you down on that. Now, I googled you just before we started because I can, because there's that thing about we are what Google says we are. And your second listing is really enigmatic. It says, Reg Starkey, born in the Blitz in London's West End. Reg was plucked from the heart of the working class and thrust into life of an unimaginable privilege and unspoken pain. I thought, cool, blimey, this is going to be an even richer conversation than I thought. So do you want to tell us where that book came about?
Well, it's East End rather than West End. So if you look at that quote again, you'll find it's East End, not West End.
Because of the lovey in me. So it's the lovey in me that's always thinking about the West End.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was born in the Blitz during an air raid in 1940, and I was plucked from the East End by a benefactor who was my godfather, and I was named after him. So he was Reginald. That's why I got my name Reginald. And he was a massive influence on my life, including at a point when I was at a very, very, very low point and writing poetry, beat poetry. I was interested in people like Jack Kerouac and Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Carl Sandburg, and I was writing my version of what they wrote, if you see what I mean, from London. And he said, I know someone who will publish it for you. What he actually meant was, I know a printer and I will pay for it to be printed. But I took it as being properly published, and that's how it happened. And it was called The Weekend Artist, which is a quote from I think Jean-Paul Sartre, who said, people who paint at weekends imagine they're artists, but that's not what being an artist is. It's not painting at the weekend.
By the way, I'm loving your delicious references to all sorts of cultural stuff at the moment. You are indeed a reservoir, Mr. Reg Starkey, and I'm really looking forward to this. And in fact, I met you so fantastically in one of the happy places in my life, which is where we go to a place in France called lesuranglais.com, where I was lucky enough to, with Katie Elliott-Armitage, who I'm also going to be interviewing at some point. She runs this wonderful premises. You're family related, I know, because you used to be married to Katie's sister, didn't you?
I was. I've been very lucky with my in-laws. Katie is one of three sisters and a brother, and I married one of them, and that they've been so good to me since the marriage ended. Likewise with my more recent marriage, my brother-in-law has remained a very, very good friend. So I've been lucky with in-laws, perhaps not quite so lucky with wives.
And by the way, there's never a coincidence when people are kind to us. I think, you know, reciprocity is a delicious thing where what you give out, you will get back. And it doesn't surprise me that people take care of you. You've done that for me, Reg. You've constantly encouraged me and bathed me in optimism about, you know, noticing what I'm about and who I'm about, and you are a really encouraging man, and I consider you a really deep friend because of that. Thank you.
Well, I'm a fan as well as a friend. That's the thing. I really do think you've got something very special, and so I wanted to help get it to the world.
Wonderful. And by the way, thank you again. But this obviously this is about bringing you, Reg Starkey. This is about you. We're going to bring you to a place called the Clearing, which is going to be something we'll talk about as a construct. And then within the Clearing, we've got some lovely storytelling archetypes or metaphors. There's going to be a tree where we shake your tree to see which apples fall out. And these are storytelling apples of an exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you will have had, before we've spoken, at least 5 minutes to think about 4 things that have shaped you, Reg Starkey, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention, and then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you that we couldn't possibly know until you tell us. So we're going to get on to that. But first of all, if somebody just comes up to you and says, hello, what do you do? You've recently had an 80th birthday, so happy birthday for that. So in all of, when you look back and when you think about your now, what do you think Reg does? So what's Reg all about? What do you do?
Well, I in answer to that question, I always say I'm a copywriter. And occasionally I say, and I was almost famous, because that's how it felt. I mean, Cliff Richard had an album called I'm Almost Famous, but that probably was when he was genuinely becoming really famous. But I never became really famous, but I was quite famous in the ad game.
Is that because you're one behind the campaign, nudging it forward, getting it across the line, and having, you know, great strap lines and things that you didn't? I
absolutely loved advertising. It wasn't my first choice because I didn't have a choice, but I absolutely loved it, and I really miss it.
And that was when I'd mentioned you being an original sort of Mad Men. So how did you get going in the world of advertising then, even though it wasn't your first choice?
Well, I basically what happened was my godfather, who Sir Reginald as he was, who was my benefactor, sent me away to private school, and he always wanted me, and my parents always wanted me to get to university, and I was quite bright, and I had A levels at, I don't know, 16, 17, and I tried one college at Oxford, which was where he'd been, and they told me they said take scholarship level exams and come back in 2 years, and I didn't want to do that, so I went off to Paris instead, to the Blitz Institute in Paris, and I came back from there without a diploma, and I didn't know what to do, and I got into law. My mother sort of said to me, you're not going to be the first one to go to university. You can be the first one to be a professional. How about an accountant? And I said, no, thank you. What about a lawyer? I said, well, that'll do. So again, my godfather benefactor got me into a firm of solicitors where I was articled. And it was only after 4.5 years of articles and a qualified pass in finals that I did a psychometric test that said I should actually have been a journalist, but I have a high interest in money, therefore advertising or public relations. So that's how it happened.
That sounds like quite a psychometric there, because that sort of nailed it for you in terms of a future path.
I think that is actually a very, very interesting area, because there's some statistic that says 50% of people are unhappy in the jobs that they do. I think there's a huge opportunity to actually give young people better advice, get them to think about it, but give them better advice on what they're going to do with their lives.
Yes, the idea of owning your own destiny, with that adage, control your own destiny or others will control it for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the benefactor, by the way, it's very romantic. It sounds like he literally plucked you from the sort of rubble of the Blitz, but that's what it sounds like. Would that be fair?
It was a bit like, well, a bit like that. I mean, you know, I was told by my parents that I was a Cockney, and I always took that as a great compliment. I thought that Cockneys was something to be proud of.
Did you say
And I,
leave it out when they first said that to you?
no, well, this is the thing. You see, I did talk like that originally, but I then years later I worked with an art director who was a Cockney, and he said, where were you born? I said, Barking. He said, we used to go to Barking for our holidays. He said, you're not a Cockney, you're an Essex boy. So I'm an Essex boy. So I was picked out of the East End of London, and I was dropped into a private school in Salisbury where I didn't talk like they talked, and I learned to talk like they talked, and that's how I talk now.
Yeah.
But that actually created problems when I went home because I didn't sound like my parents, and so while they loved me, I was sort of, you know, there was a gap between us, and I didn't sound like my oldest brother and sister. So there was a gap between me and them, and I didn't fit in with the village kids in the village because I was little Lord Fauntleroy as far as they were concerned. I mean, it was difficult. And then when I went back to school, I wasn't good enough for them either. So, you
There's a
know, because I
lovely,
wasn't a true gent.
there's a theme there, if I may, Reg, about sounding like you've got quite comfortable in being what's called an outlier. You're never quite there at the core of it, but you're outside looking in like a wily fox observing.
I have got quite comfortable with it. I had a life coach a long time ago called Sean de Warren, and I said to Sean, I don't fit in anywhere, and he said, I want you to rewrite the script and say I fit in everywhere.
I love that.
So I now feel that I can fit in anywhere and everywhere, because I don't feel like I did feel that I was a traitor to my class, that my class is working class, and that to go into advertising was actually to exploit the working class, to exploit the masses by using intelligence and, you know, manipulating them.
Yes.
And I certainly don't belong to the upper class or the middle class, but I feel more comfortable with them now because I sort of understand them better, and I'm more tolerant, and I'm just anyway. It's
And,
been a useful shift of changing the words from I don't fit in anywhere to I fit in everywhere.
and in coaching terms, that's delicious because it's about the notion of reframing, you know, how to just change the script, as you say.
Yeah.
And your benefactor, just before I move away from them, you know, Reginald, the godfather, the benefactor, how did he discover you?
He discovered me because my father worked for him. He started a charity in the East End of London called the Dockland Settlements,
The what
which is still
settlement,
going.
sorry.
The Dockland.
Yeah.
I think he probably invented the word, you know, in the way we talk about Docklands now, but he called the Dockland Settlement. And that basically what happened. There's a good story behind this, so I hope you don't mind if I tell it.
Please do.
He went through the First World War. He went to Oxford, to Hertford College, and he wanted to be a playwright. The theatre was his great love, and he was getting material for something he was writing, and he went to a trial at the Old Bailey where an 18-year-old from the East End of London was being prosecuted for the murder of his girlfriend, who'd become pregnant by somebody else. And he followed this trial, and the young man was eventually sentenced to death, because that was how it was in the old days. And the judge put on a black cap on and said, you know, you'll be taken from this place to, you know, hang by your neck until you are dead, and may God have mercy on your soul. And when it was very dramatic. And when it was over, he was horrified by the lawyers who were so completely unmoved by the fact that some guy had just been sentenced to death, that first of all he tried to launch the appeal to get the guy let off. When that failed, he decided he would stop wanting to be a writer or playwright and go to the East End and see whether he could actually practically do something. And that's what he did, and that's what he got knighted for. And during that time, which we were talking about the 1920s, my father worked for him, and then he sort of adopted the whole family because he was a bachelor, didn't have a family, so we were a ready-made family.
So he became a sort of lifelong philanthropist in his own
Absolutely. I mean,
philosophy.
I didn't know my grandparents, and he was like a grandfather as much as a godfather. But he was actually a good Christian, a good writer, a lovely man. You know, tremendous company, and a very generous man. And he
And what
just
was his full name? I know he's Reg, you said, or Reginald. What was
yeah,
his full
Sir
name?
Reginald Kennedy Cox, and he wrote a few books and he wrote a couple of plays, but he got his knighthood for what he did in the East End of London.
And talk about a sort of presence in an ever-present presence in your life. How long ago did he die, Reginald? Reg?
How long ago did he die? In the last century. I honestly can't remember how long ago, but I mean, I would say he wasn't at my second wedding, so he wasn't. I don't know if he was at my first wedding, so I don't know. In the 1960s, probably he died. I honestly can't remember.
Sure, but
But
he's still very present.
he had a service in Salisbury Cathedral when he died, so he was, you know, he was a big in the Playhouse Theatre there, and in the Royal Court in London. So yeah, he was a good guy.
Wow, and to have him as a sort of constant presence in, you know, putting you on the path to where you are now is a very profound thing, I think.
Well, in your four things that shaped you, he was number one on the list.
So let's come on to the clearing then. So the clearing is a metaphor about where you go to get clutter-free, innovative, inspirational, which can be different for all of us. You know, in my world, it's like a comedy improvisational, yes, and theatre in the round type space. What would a clearing be like for you, Reg?
Again, we're with my godfather, my benefactor. He had the most beautiful, before he died, he had the most beautiful house. He rented the most beautiful house in Salisbury. It was called the North Canonry. And it's on the edge of the cathedral close, and with the most amazing long garden that goes from the house down to the River Avon. And at the where the grass hits the river, there's also a summer house, and that's my clearing. The happiest times of my young life were spent fishing with my father. From that, there was a weeping willow there, and beside the weeping willow and another tree, we used to fish. And for me, it was like being Christopher Robin and A.A. Milne in the woods. You know, we were just, well, I was blissfully happy, and I think my dad was blissfully happy. So that's my clearing for sure.
And I love that. And by the way, of now, one of the most enjoyable programs I've been watching of late, and I hope you have too, is Paul Whitehouse and Bob Mortimer. It's Gone Fishing. And it's just this love. Have you been watching it?
I've heard about it, and I thought it was about fishing, so I didn't watch it. But now I hear it's about them talking about, you know, whatever comes up, and talking about things that men usually don't talk about. But I really want to have a look at it now.
It is all those things. It's just a rich tapestry of just two, you know, lovely, compelling human beings enjoying something, a conduit of where you go. It's a bit like they're in their own clearing, which for both of them has been fishing.
Yeah.
So sorry, back to your thank you for your clearing. It is sounding just majestic and beautiful and simple. When did you last visit your willow tree and the summer house?
A couple of weeks ago, I was sort of feeling so gloomy. I was feeling like drinking again. But I went back to my clearing, and I tell you, I don't know if you know there's a painting by Constable of Across the Meadows.
I was thinking that when you first. I was thinking of that as you spoke about Salisbury and your going back in time. I was absolutely sorry. Tell me more. Yes, I'm
sorry. All I'm saying is that is absolutely the route into the river. The river and the North Canonry and the Cathedral Close are between. You know, you can't obviously see them in that painting, but they are that from that perspective. That's where if you walk from where the painter was standing across the meadows, you'd come to the river. So you could wade across the river, walk up the most beautiful garden I've ever been in, the North Canonry, and get out the other side to the Cathedral Close and then to the cathedral itself.
And it's
it is the most beautiful.
Constable's Salisbury Cathedral, isn't it? Is the painting?
Yeah.
Thank you for evoking that memory too. And by the way, resonating with you, Salisbury was one of my happiest repertory theatre experiences in a production of Hamlet. with a brilliant actor called Colin Hurley, but that's just by the by. But anyway, I love the fact that you managed to get back there a couple of weeks ago. So you still have access to that summer house and to that willow tree.
Oh, sorry. I thought I meant in my mind. I meant in my mind. In my mind. Sorry. No. I don't. No. I haven't had access to that for years and years and years. And in fact, I was planning my funeral with somebody, and they said, "Where would you like to, have a celebration?" And I said, "That in my clearing. That's where I'd like it." And he said, "We can't get there. It's not practical to imagine that we can get a crowd into, get permission, blah blah blah. But we could do it in the cathedral close, because if we're talking about after the body is burned and there's no body hanging around, we could have a celebration party with permission in the cathedral close for 20, 30, 50 people, whatever." And that would be good. So I've been thinking about that. My children say, "Bloody hell, that's a long way for us to drive," and all the rest of it. But that's probably where.
By the way, I promised to show the good burgers of Salisbury this film or this podcast, so that I'm pretty sure this will get you in. Because honestly, a man who deserves to go exactly to that place as a homecoming, it sounds like you are that person.
Well, I would certainly would be thrilled, because we lived in Salisbury. We had a house further down the river, as it were, not so grand as the North Canonry, and I had my happiest early memories are sort of there during the war.
And I'm pausing deliberately there because I'm just drinking that lovely imagery in. So it's a privilege to be here then, Reg, in your clearing with you in the canonry near the willow tree, River Avon, Salisbury Cathedral, Constable, and I'm standing alongside you now with a tree where we're going to shake your tree to see which apples fall out. And so I've explained already at the beginning of the podcast what the storytelling apples are, but what would you like to talk about first? Would you like to talk about the things that have inspired you or have shaped you or that grab your attention, or the quirky fact? What would you like to talk about?
I'd like to do it because I'm a Virgo and I'm sort of captain captious and pedantic. I'd like to do it in 4, 3, 2, 1. If you don't mind, I would feel comfortable doing that.
So we've talked a lot.
We've talked about a bit about the sort of the 4, because I mean, top of my list of the 4 would be my godfather, my benefactor, Sir Reginald, because he had an absolutely massive, absolutely fundamental impact in shaping my life, of taking me from what would have been state school education to private school education. Now, I'm not saying that was entirely without, it did have its sort of problems on both sides. And funnily enough, I did a hypnotherapeutic session where the therapist said, "I want to put your father in the chair, and you tell him everything you've never told him," sort of thing. And I said, "Oh, I adored my father." And she said, "Oh, he's perfect, was he?" So I said, "No, he wasn't perfect." She said, "Well, how perfect was he?" So I said, "I don't know, 90%. She said, "Can we work on the 10%? So I said, "Okay, we'll work on the 10%. So I'm hypnotized. I put my father in the chair, and my attack on him was to say, "How could you send me to a private school when my brother had gone before me, and you'd seen how unhappy he was because of all the bullying and all the awful things that were going on in those days? How could you send me?" And then the trick was that I would then be after I'd done my 20 minutes of telling him everything he'd done wrong, I would be put in the chair and I would be him, and she would be me, and she would throw all that mud at me, and it's the most therapeutically wonderful thing. Anyway, so my single biggest influence was definitely my godfather. I'm not saying my family weren't wonderfully loving and whatever, but he was by far the biggest influence, and a benign and a good influence, although there were some downsides. The second thing which I mentioned was the sort of 15 guineas that I spent with vocational guidance to do a psychometric test, because I was really, really unhappy, and I was failing exams for the first time in my life, being articled at a firm of solicitors, and I was absolutely hating it. And I'd got a qualified pass in finals, and on the strength of that, I got a job in a very high-powered commercial firm, and I was completely out of my depth, and so I was hating it even more than I was in my original firm. And I took this test, and they said to me, if you had come to us at 18, we'd have told you to look at journalism, try journalism. But you're now 24, you have a very high interest in money. You're never going to make it as a lawyer. You know, we recommend you try advertising or public relations. And so that was when I tried to get into advertising, but a lot of people were trying to get into advertising, and I couldn't find a job. And at the age of 24, I went on a course at Watford, which was the only place I know that was doing a course in copywriting. And I was 24. I had some life experience. I had an old sports car, and I had the time of my life with these sort of 18, 19-year-olds. It was just a wonderful time, and I came out top of that class, as I should have done, not because I was necessarily the best, but because I had more experience. It wasn't a fair race, you know what I mean? But I absolutely loved it. And then I got a job in advertising, and although my mother used to say, my son's a lawyer, but he works in advertising, because that made her feel better. And my godfather said to me, advertising is a graveyard for mediocre minds, which may be true. I was happy as Larry, and I could be an absolute prima donna, and I loved it, and it was great. So the 15 Guinness is the second thing that absolutely changed my life. The next
Just
thing.
pause there for a second.
Sorry,
What was the psychometric test? Can you remember? Because the 15
Well, not exactly, but they asked you literally hundreds of questions, and they keep repeating the questions, and so it's designed to fool you in a way. So
this must have been pre-Myers-Briggs and things like that. So I'm just interested.
This is pre. Well, I would imagine it's pre-Myers-Briggs. We're talking about. Oh God, we're talking about 1964, something like that. And what they did was they emerged from that. They'd say, here's a profile of a successful lawyer, and then they had an acetate of my acetate, and they laid it over the successful lawyer, and they said, look, you're okay here, here, and here, but look, this one, which has got to be right on the right-hand side, is right on the left-hand side for you. You'll never make it as a lawyer. You're not, you're actually not lawyer material.
I love that. Psychometrics with acetate. Gosh, that sounds amazing.
Well, it's a long time ago. But it changed my life, and I'm wonderfully grateful to them. And I'm also grateful to my parents and my godfather, because he had to pay 500 guineas a year for me to be articled to this firm of solicitors. I mean, that's how it was. It was, articled clerks, and you paid, and you sat at the foot of a partner who was called Mr. Jason or Mr. Tony or Mr. Jeffrey, and it was absolutely Dickensian. It was barbaric. But this investment of time and money had been, well, I'd invested the time, they'd invest the money, but there was no resentment when I said, look, I've done this test. I'm not cut out to be a lawyer. I should be trying to get into advertising, apart from making remarks like it's a graveyard for mediocre minds. There was nobody tried to stop me. Everybody encouraged me. So that is definitely the second one of the three. The third of the four. The third one of the four. Sorry, I'm slumping down again. I'm gonna
pull yourself up.
Yeah, you pull my socks up. Yeah, tighten my belt. The third of the four was is that I was the youngest of four children, and in my life, as I've told you, Chris, I lost my other three siblings in the most unbelievably bizarre, unlikely circumstances. My two brothers, George and Bob, were both killed in an air crash on a civil airliner on a scheduled flight where halfway between London and Salzburg, the tail fell off. My sister-in-law was also killed. So three of my nieces and my niece and two nephews were orphaned in that crash. And then my sister, who was 18 years older than me, adopted the three orphan children. And then a few years later, she was driving on a country road in Kent with the youngest of the three children. and a woman coming the other way had a heart attack and crashed into her and killed her, and severely at the time injured the it was tremendously traumatic, the youngest child, but he survived and is alive and well, and his daughter's just got married this year, which is despite having to postpone it through COVID, has got married. So my great niece has got married, and the wedding was, as we couldn't go there, for lots of us, the wedding was on Zoom. So that was a new experience, and that was wonderful. So the death of my siblings is definitely something that has shaped me. And
how many years apart were those tragic episodes?
My brothers and my sister-in-law were killed in 1971. My sister was killed in, oh God, I honestly don't know, but within 10 years of that.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot with remembering.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I should know, but I don't. Anyway, so that was the downside, and then the fourth thing that shaped my life is that I have 3 children, Davy, Jerome, and Jazz, from 2 marriages, and they have totally transformed, shaped my life because of their forgiveness of my bad behavior and losing all the family money and drinking and gambling and all sorts of bad stuff. They seem to have forgiven me for that, and they are the light of my life. And they produced the most, for my 80th birthday, they, to my complete surprise, produced the most wonderful little surprise video for me, which includes my first wife, my second wife, my last great love, and other friends, all saying nice things about me. So that was just blissful. So
I can't let that slip. The last great love. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I discovered I haven't had a drink. I haven't had a drink this century, and all of my love affairs there haven't been many. There've been four great loves in my life. One I was expected to marry, 2 I did marry, and 1 after I got divorced from the last one, I fell in love with, and we are still terrific friends. I mean, really great friends, but no longer a couple. That they got her, they got my first wife, my second wife. So I was really honoured that all 3 of them were in this video.
And that's a testament to your quality in that you can whip out the entire canon of past relationships, and they're there standing the right way up, saying nice things about you. So that's something you've earned as a quality.
Well, I think if you said that to them, they'd said, Chris, that just shows how little you know him. You should try living with him. My God, he's murder.
Well, the barefaced fact, though, if it had gone toxic, there's no way on this planet they'd have agreed to do the film. So I think you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice there.
Well, at my 70th birthday, I had a big party, the only big party I've ever had. And the idea was that everybody who wanted to speak had 3 minutes to speak, but I had as long as I liked. And I'd seen I can't think of his name, the guy who wrote, the Tory who wrote lots of books and made lots of money and now has
Jeffrey Archer.
Jeffrey Archer, yes. I saw Jeffrey Archer do the most fabulous thing in a room in a pub where he walked around talking to us, and then he was going to talk. And before he did the talk, he said, "Well, now I've met you," he said, "everything I'd planned to say is completely irrelevant." And he appeared to throw his notes away, and then did the most brilliant, what appeared to be ad hoc speech, but in fact was entirely what he planned to say anyway. And I plan to do the same thing. So when everybody else has got 3 minutes, I've got a whole film script, which was 110 pages long, and said, I thought people were all going to, their hearts would sink when they thought I was going to read or whatever, this massive tome. And then I threw it away and said, I'm just going to do it from my heart, But one of the jokes that I forgot was my second wife had baked a cake, she was a great cook, and she'd done a cake for me. And I was going to say, thank you for making the cake and not making a scene. Anyway, I forgot this joke, and perhaps it was divine intervention. But so there we are. Yeah. So sorry, you asked me, and I've
No,
answered.
quite right. And forgive me if I've sidetracked you. So we're still chipping through beautifully your things that have shaped you. And where else do you want to go?
Well, we're done. What's the next one down?
It's inspired you. 3 things that inspire you.
3 things that inspire me. Words inspire me in any form. Written, spoken, sung, a speech. Words. I love words. The second thing that inspires me are films, movies. I absolutely love movies. I mean, I love the theatre too, but I absolutely love movies.
Do you have a favourite film, Reg?
Oh gosh, I don't know. All-time favourite. It's very hard. I mean, I sometimes think about sort of desert island films, and my desert island films would certainly include Some Like It Hot, because I just love all the different actors in it. I thought Marilyn Monroe was just the most gorgeous thing in the world in that film, and I thought it was a lovely film. I love the gambling films. I love oh gosh, what was the one? A couple of gambling films that I love.
Sting,
all the old.
Do you mean
The
Sting with Paul
Sting? The Sting is one of them. Funny enough, I was thinking of The Hustler. I absolutely love The Hustler, and The Cincinnati Kid. The Cincinnati Kid and The Sting. I would have put above The Sting, and then the Elvis films, not the Elvis films after he came out of the army, which were dreadful, but the ones he made before one of them he had Hal Wallace producing. Loving You, King Creole, Jailhouse Rock. He could have been a great actor if he'd been properly directed, and he is a fantastic singer. So movies, and then finally my third category would be horse racing, horse racing. I absolutely find it inspirational, and I mean I was a hopeless gambler, but I always loved the spectacle and the event of horse racing. And this coming Sunday is the last big horse race of the year, really. I mean, there is the Cesarewitch at Newmarket, but the Arc de Triomphe in Paris is the last big horse race on the flat. I'm not talking about all weather. I'm talking about on grass. And I've had some wonderful weekends in Paris for that race, which I will always remember. And this has been a very funny year because racing's been completely knocked sideways by COVID and lockdown. But it's meant that when it arrived, even without crowds, there's been a massive racing to watch, and it's been fabulous.
It conjures up images, and we all know what it's like to try and drive around the Arc de Triomphe, but the idea of horses galloping around it, I appreciate that's not where it's actually based, but it
happens in the Bois de Boulogne at Longchamp. Yeah, and it's the most beautiful race course. It's really elegant. It's like Ascot or York, but unlike Ascot or York, it does not have bookmakers. So it's incredibly elegant. It's people dress up to go racing, and it's beautiful. And the last race that I remember, I'll never forget, was that Zoe, my wife, and I had gone to Sandown for the Eclipse, and a jockey called Reg Starkey was riding a horse called Star Appeal, and she backed it just because it was called Star Appeal and it was written by somebody called Starkey. And I said, "What price did you get?" And she said, "I got 16 to 1. I said, "I could get you 20 to 1 anywhere." So I went and got her 20 to 1. And so she had 16 to 1, I had 20 to 1, and it won. And then it was running in the Arc, and I said, "It's got no chance in the Arc. It's absolutely completely outclassed." And she backed it 10 francs on the tote, and it paid 119 to 1 on the tote. So the horses that I backed, which should have won, didn't win, and she had this massive cash that we celebrated.
She was an instinctive gambler, and you were a terrible gambler.
Well, she was good, and her mother said to me, I have 2 mother-in-law stories. Her mother-in-law, this is my second mother-in-law, said to me, Reg, my daughter had many vices until she met you, but gambling was not one of them.
And by the way,
And
excuse my ignorance of racing. If she gets 119 to 1 on the tote, I don't really know what I'm talking about. What sort of pot of cash are we talking there?
we're talking about, say, imagine it's a £10 bet, and it's 119 to 1. She's got she's got £10 times 100. If it had been, it was 10 francs, which was not £10. It would have been 10 hundreds and 10 20s. So that would have been it's a lump of cash. Anyway, going back to my other mother-in-law joke or story, my first mother-in-law, before she was my mother-in-law, said to me when she was just the mother of the woman I wanted to marry, she said to me, "You marry my daughter over my dead body," and I had to resist saying, "That could be arranged." Anyway,
I like that you've bunged in 2 mother-in-law stories as well. There, fantastic.
Well, they're true. They're true. Yeah,
they are. And so we're now down. If you're liking the sort of trajectory down the escalator or down the path, we're into 2 things that never fail to grab your attention.
Good ads. Good ads is the first thing. I at one stage I was president of the Creative Circle in London, and the way the formula that we had for judging was not anything academic. It was I wish I'd done that ad. So it was totally instinctive. So anytime I think, oh my God, I wish I'd written that, that poster, that press ad, that TV commercial, that radio commercial, whenever I hear something like that I find inspirational. I just love advertising. I mean, I used to bore people by saying it's the greatest art form in the world. It's certainly the most.
Any favorite examples in there?
Well, if you go back, I mean, the things like Guinness is good for you. I mean, you couldn't say it now, but it's fantastic. Beans means Heinz is the most economical. I mean, what is his name? Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson are trying to do these 3 words things, and beans means Heinz is still way ahead of anything they've written. Currently, there seems to be a great lack of, to my mind, of brilliant advertising. I mean, in the 70s, if you watched the centre break at News at 10, you would see like a show reel of stunning commercials. You really would, and they're a bit thin on the ground now. I mean, the many channels means that there are more commercials going out on more channels, but the quality has gone down a lot. Yes. I like the priceless campaign. Do you know the one that says something else is priceless? I think that was a clever campaign with a lot of with a lot of mileage, and that was good. So I can't think of anything else at the moment that I think is wonderful. Funnily enough,
sorry.
Well, thinking of you, there's a commercial out for Vauxhall which says and it made me think of you, because it's sort of, she says, I want to ask you about this and offer, and he says, and it's free this and that, whatever. It's quite good.
And that's because of the comedy improvisational yes and.
Absolutely, yes and yes. It made me think of that, and so I thought, well, that would be my favourite at the moment because of you and it.
Wonderful, and it is a wonderfully liberating mindset. Yes, and as we have explored twice, because you've come to my workshops twice, Reg. Thank you. And so, what's the ad you were most proud of? If I can press you, you weren't expecting me to ask you, but
I did. Well, I mean, we did a campaign for mushrooms, which was make room for the mushrooms, which I was quite proud of, and which was TV, but. I did a lot of media ads, which I absolutely loved, and some of them were very not very friendly. So we were working for the Daily Express when the Daily Express was still a broadsheet, and the Daily Mail went to what it called Compact, which we thought was actually tabloid, and they did a poster which said compassionate, lots of words, positive words, conceptual. I can't think what the words were, but a whole list of positive C words. And we took a picture of it and we put at the bottom Codswallop, and we said, who are you kidding? You know, everybody knows that you've just gone tabloid because you want to become popular. You're not a quality newspaper anymore. We're really vicious. It was horrid. And I worked on the Evening Standard before the Evening Standard became a free publication, and we had the Evening News as our rival, and we did some really, really hostile ads. I mean, there was one where you had a thumbs up and a thumbs down, and the thumbs up was the Evening Standard, and the guy had a shirt with cufflinks, you know what I mean? And the Evening News, he had sort of oil under his nails, and it said, you know,
Ooh.
Evening Standard, you know, up, you know, circulation up, ad revenue up, something else up, and then Evening News, something down, down, down. It was very nasty stuff, but I quite enjoyed it.
So it's the idea of sort of going in for the roughy-tufty fight of it and subverting
the competitive nature. I mean, the thing I liked about law was the thought of advocacy. You know, that you plead a special case. You know, you do the best you can with whatever you've got. You know, yeah.
And of course, the whole raison d'etre of the successful advert is to drive the message forward, and sometimes that's about subversion of other messages.
Well, I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday, funnily enough, about this sounds like a rather highfalutin complex concept, but of generic arrogation. Now, if you haven't come across generic arrogation, arrogation is that you take the generic benefit of the category and you attach it to your brand. So if you take lager, for example, the generic benefit of lager is refreshment. Okay, so if you're Heineken, you take that generic benefit and you say Heineken refreshes the parts that other beers cannot reach. So you make a competitive advertising idea out of a generic, and that becomes, you know, that's a very strong way of doing things.
There you are, weaving your magic beautifully as to why you are a true expert in your field. I love that. Which reminds me of that joke. How can you tell a good farmer he's always outstanding in his field? And you sound like you're outstanding in yours. That was.
I never heard that gag before. I should use that. Yeah.
So we're now. Anything else that never fails to grab your attention? You said good advertising. What's the other thing that never fails to grab your attention? Actually, sorry, it was words, wasn't it? You've done that.
Words. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Sorry, it's because we're on the open road of a conversation. I've just remembered we have covered that. It's words and then adverts that hook you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So what about a quirky or unusual fact about you, Reg Starkey, that we couldn't know until you tell us?
Well, I'm probably the only person in England that has a flat without a cooker. My kitchen does not have a cooker. I mean, I've got a microwave.
Okay.
And I've got a hob, but I don't cook. I'm very non-technical. I can't change a plug. I tend to drop lights if I put a light in. If I'm changing a bulb and the thing's on, I tend to drop it if I think I'm going to be electrocuted.
So the question on everyone's lips is, how do you eat then? Are you always dining out? Is that what you do?
When I can, I dine out. And there are things like, you know, meal deals, which are amazing value. If you go to, little plug for Tesco. If you go to Tesco on their £3 meal deal, you can get over £6 worth of goods for £3. So you get some fruit. You can get, you know, a very nice sandwich, and you get a drink. And the real price, if that's, you know, the actual price, if you bought them individually, would be over £6, and you get it for £3.
You're a merciless admin, because we've gone all the way through. Now you're just doing a merciless plug for Tesco's. Every little helps, which is 3 words as well.
Well, yeah, and that's another great slogan, isn't it? It really is a great slogan.
I was playing with you. Yes, that's exactly why I said that. And indeed, if maybe this podcast can ultimately get sponsored by Tesco's.
I think they should sponsor it. Yeah.
So now we bring you away from your wonderful shaking of your apple tree to the clearing. So you've been giving us lots of alchemy and gold as we've gone through anyway. But when you are in flow and in purpose, you know, what is the alchemy and the gold that Reg Starkey likes to bring, do you think?
I don't really know. Kindness, tolerance, patience, things like that. I don't know.
And I've described you before as being a really deeply sensitive soul. So everything you've just said makes complete sense to me. Although you said, I don't know, you bring kindness, warmth, generosity. Anything else that's occurring in what we're riffing about?
No, I think this is self-flattery. I mean, if you talk to either of my ex-wives or my ex-love, they would say, you don't know him, he's a monster. He can be a monster, and I can be a monster. I'm very pedantic. I got the nickname Captain Captious because I am very pedantic.
Nice alliteration. Captain Captious, was that?
Captain Captious, yes. But I am trying to improve myself.
So you're on a road and a path of self-improvement.
I know it sounds a bit pompous, but yeah, absolutely. There's and I will be on it till the day I stop breathing.
And the day you stop moving will be when we can use your caption of "make room for the mushrooms."
Make room for the mushrooms. Yeah.
So, and by the way, in all the time I've known you, I have to say I've never experienced or noticed your dark side. I've just been bathed in lots of generosity and warmth from you. We've all got dark sides. I get that, but I think what you wear your heart really on your, you're being incredibly honest in what you're saying, because you've alluded to darker traits to do with gambling, surviving alcoholism, that sort of thing. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the dark side?
Not really. I mean, I at worst I was suicidal. I mean, had suicidal thoughts, but never had the courage to take them any further. And I was seeing a therapist. This again is a good gag. It's a true gag. It's I've only been witty sort of twice in my life, and this was one of them. The therapist said to me, Reg, what you need to realize is you suffer with low-grade depression. And I said, even my depression is low-grade. And she said, just be grateful that it is, because if it was bad, you wouldn't be able to get up, So that was that.
And you do have a sense of humor to pull you out. So, and you're a survivor, obviously. I know you celebrated your 80th birthday party. And you have told us some, I remember when we first met, you told me the story about the day when you realized you needed to go into recovery. We don't have to go there, but it was I remember that story.
Yeah. But, and my other witty moment, because I've only got two in my life, so I want to share both of them. I was working with an art director who was involved with a lady called Lynn Middlehurst, who was a copywriter and is now married to her. And but my wife knew that I thought she was really attractive, and she said, and she wrote poetry. Lynn writes the most amazing poetry, and she said, so he says to me, she says, that Lynn Middlehurst, you like her poetry and her tits. I said, you're right on all three counts. And immediately I said it, I regretted it, because I didn't get thumped physically, but I got thumped verbally.
And divorce proceedings commenced.
Well, and eventually, yes. So there's any connection between the two things.
Does the poetess know that that's what you said about her?
Oh yes, I told her. Yes, yes. And she thought it was quite funny. And funnily enough,
was she on your film talking nice things?
No, she's not. I mean, funnily enough, she and my art director have reinvented themselves as people who run a thing called the Gallivanter's Guide, and it's a sort of holiday, travel with no expense spared, and they've gone off to the country, and we have very much drifted apart. I'm sad to say. I have spoken to them during lockdown, but that's the first time for ages. And I did have the most I went down to stay with them, and I did have the most blissful time where we were all three of us, and we've got baggage between us, but we had the most blissful time picking blackberries. It was just a very simple thing. In the sunshine, we were picking blackberries. It was absolutely blissful.
There's a lovely thread of recurring nature about, the willow tree in Salisbury, the river, and now blackberry picking as well. So, beautiful stuff. So I'm going to bring you to a place now where I'm going to reward you with a cake. for having done us the courtesy of speaking to me on the Good Listening To podcast. So the cake at Reg is where you're now going to be invited to put a cherry on the cake, and the cherry can take the form, open to interpretation, of the best bit of advice that you've ever been given that you'd like to share with us. It could be advice you might give to a younger version of yourself with the beautiful gift of hindsight that we now have. And it's open to interpretation. So it can even be what you'd like your legacy to be. So how would you like to interpret your opportunity, Reg Starkey, to put the cherry on the cake?
Well, if I was saying answering the question, what is the best advice you've ever been given? I think one of the best bits of advice, and certainly the shortest, was never assume. I think never assume is an absolutely brilliant piece of advice. If I was talking about blowing my own trumpet, the one thing that I've tried to do, and I've tried to share with my children, is the concept of right sizing, of actually being able to recognize the difference between a mountain and a molehill, and not looking at a mountain and saying it's only a molehill. Or what much more often tends to happen is, encountering a molehill and treating it like a mountain. So right sizing is a good thing to strive for. And the one phrase that I think I've invented, which if I was being vain, I would put as my cherry on the cake, would be, only the end of the world is the end of the world. Because I know people where every single problem they run into is treated as if it's somewhere approaching the end of the world. It's definitely a mountain, it's not a molehill. So right sizing would be that. And the only other thing I'd like to say is that the most wonderful thing that has happened to me this year has been the birth of my first grandson, maybe my last grandchild. He's called Ziggy, and he was born 02/02/2020. So that's a palindrome, 02/02/2020. And he's just, at the moment, he's, only 7-8 months old. But he's just brilliant, and he's inspirational.
And Ziggy the palindrome is a rock star for our future, in memory of David Bowie as well. I love that.
Yeah.
Reg, it's been an immense privilege. Just to give you the opportunity to, is there anything else you'd like to say in our experience of having given you the Good Listening To?
Thank you.
And thank you too. What an immense privilege. And I look forward to our next conversation. You have been listening to the Good Listening To podcast with me, Chris Grimes, and this has been the adorable and the gorgeous Reg Starkey. Good night.